My wife called. I emptied our savings and left the country, she laughed. But she didn't see what was coming. The call came at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because I was staring at my computer screen, watching the seconds tick by until my shift ended at 5. The office was quiet except for the gentle hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional click of keyboards. My phone vibrated against the metal desk, and Melissa's picture flashed across the screen, her smile wide, eyes bright with mischief from our anniversary trip to Cancun last year. I answered with a smile. "Hey, what's up?" Her laugh came first, light and airy, but with an edge I'd never heard before. "I emptied our savings and left the country," she said, her voice casual as if she were telling me she'd picked up milk on the way home. For a moment, I thought it was a joke. "Very funny. Did you need me to grab dinner on the way home?" "There's no home anymore, David. Not for me." Her voice hardened. "I'm calling from the airport. My flight leaves in 20 minutes. I remember standing up so suddenly my chair rolled backward and hit the cubicle wall. A few coworkers glanced my way, but I turned toward the window, lowering my voice. "What are you talking about? Is this some kind of prank? Check our bank accounts if you don't believe me." Another laugh, this one colder than before. "Oh wait, you can't. I changed all the passwords yesterday." My fingers trembled as I pulled up our joint account on my phone. The balance that should have shown our modest savings of $43,217, money we'd been putting aside for a down payment on a house, now displayed a glaring $212.36. Just enough to keep the account open. "Melissa, what the hell?" My voice cracked. "We've been saving for 3 years. What's going on?" "What's going on is that I've wasted 8 years with you, living paycheck to paycheck, driving that piece of junk car, eating leftovers 4 nights a week. I'm done waiting for things to get better." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. We'd been struggling financially, or so I thought. The economy had hit our neighborhood hard. We'd both taken pay cuts to keep our jobs during the recession. We'd agreed to be frugal together, to save for our future. At least, that's what I believed we were doing. "Where are you going? We can talk about this. I've done enough talking." Background noise swelled through the phone, announcements in a language I didn't recognize. "The truth is, I've been planning this for months. I deserve better than what you can give me." "Months?" The word felt like a knife between my ribs. I thought about all the late nights she claimed to be working, the weekend. Girls' trips. That had become more frequent. "Is there someone else?" Her silence was answer enough. "Was anything real?" I asked, my voice barely audible even to myself. "You're a nice guy, David. Too nice. Too trusting. Too simple." She sighed, and I could picture her checking her watch, impatient to end this call. "You should see your face when you get your paycheck each month, so proud of your mediocrity. I need more than that. I need excitement. Passion. A life worth living. What about our vows? What about—" "Final boarding call," she interrupted. "Look, I did you a favor. You'll thank me someday for setting you free from this suburban nightmare. Oh, and before you try anything stupid, everything's legal. I forged your signature on a few things, but good luck proving it." "How could you do this?" The question came out hollow, directed more at the universe than at her. "Easily," she replied. "The hard part was pretending to love you all these years. Goodbye, David. Don't try to find me." The line went dead. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, as if waiting for the punchline. A practical joke. A misunderstanding. Something that would make sense of the last 3 minutes that had just shattered my reality. When I finally lowered my phone, I noticed my hands were steady. Strangely steady. My breath came evenly. The initial shock was giving way to something else, a peculiar kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and methodically began checking every account we shared. Credit cards maxed out. Investment account emptied. Even our safe deposit box at the bank, cleared out, according to the access log from yesterday afternoon. 8 years of marriage liquidated in 48 hours. My coworker, Jim, rolled his chair over. Everything okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost. I managed a tight smile. Just some unexpected news. Bad? I considered the question. I'm not sure yet. What Melissa didn't know, what nobody knew, was that 3 weeks before her disappearing act, I had boarded a plane myself. A quiet, early morning flight to attend a private funeral in Boston for my great-uncle Raymond. The uncle my family rarely mentioned, the black sheep who had made a fortune in real estate and cut ties with everyone except my grandmother before I was born. Somehow, he'd kept tabs on me through the years. And somehow, despite never meeting him while he was alive, I became the primary beneficiary of his estate, with one odd condition attached. As I sat in that sterile office after the funeral, his attorney had slid the paperwork across the table with a solemn expression. Raymond was a peculiar man, he'd said, but a good judge of character. He wanted you to have everything, the properties, the investments, the liquid assets, approximately $7.3 million in total. I nearly choked. There must be some mistake. No mistake. But there is one condition. The attorney adjusted his glasses. Complete discretion for 1 full year. No public acknowledgement of your inheritance. No lifestyle changes that would alert others to your new financial status. Raymond believed that money reveals people's true characters. He wanted you to see who stands by you when they think you have nothing. I'd agreed, more out of respect than understanding. I returned home and said nothing to Melissa or anyone else about Uncle Raymond's fortune. I kept driving my 12-year-old Honda. I brought homemade lunches to work. I continued clipping coupons for our weekend grocery runs. All while secretly meeting with financial advisors during my lunch breaks. Now, sitting at my desk as my marriage evaporated, I understood Uncle Raymond's wisdom with perfect clarity. Melissa had failed the test she didn't know she was taking. She thought she was leaving me broke and broken. She had no idea what was coming. I opened my private email account and typed a message to Raymond's attorney. It's time to move forward with the plans we discussed. She's gone. 3 weeks before Melissa's call, I had slipped away quietly under the pretense of a business trip. In reality, I was flying to Boston for a funeral I never expected to attend. Uncle Raymond wasn't actually my uncle. He was my grandmother's brother, a man whose name was only mentioned in hushed tones during family gatherings. A black sheep who had made his fortune through shrewd investments and a ruthlessness that had alienated most of our family. I'd only seen him once as a child, a tall figure in an expensive suit who'd ruffled my hair and told me I had the right kind of eyes. The funeral was small, just a handful of people in a private cemetery overlooking the Atlantic. I stood apart from the others, feeling like an imposter. When an older man in a tailored suit approached me afterward, I assumed he was another distant relative. Mr. Wallace, he said, extending his hand. I'm Gerald Hoffman, Raymond's attorney. He was very specific about wanting to speak with you after the service. I followed him to a sleek black car that took us to a downtown office with views of the harbor. The conference room had one folder sitting in the center of a long mahogany table. Raymond left very specific instructions, Gerald explained, sliding the folder toward me. You are the sole beneficiary of his estate. I laughed nervously. There must be some mistake. I barely knew him. No mistake. Gerald's expression remained serious. Raymond kept tabs on everyone in the family. He watched your career, your marriage, how you handled money. He admired your work ethic and integrity, even when life wasn't particularly kind to you. I opened the folder and nearly fell out of my chair. Property listings. Investment portfolios. Bank statements. All totaling over $7 million. This can't be right, I whispered. Raymond had no children and no spouse. He believed wealth should go to those who would respect it. Gerald removed his glasses. However, there's one condition to your inheritance. My stomach tightened. What kind of condition? Discretion. Complete discretion for 1 year. You cannot tell anyone about this inheritance. You must continue living exactly as you have been, same house, same car, same lifestyle. Raymond wanted to see who in your life was genuine. He wants me to test people? From beyond the grave? Gerald smiled thinly. Raymond believed money doesn't just change the person who has it, it changes everyone around them. He wanted you to see people's true colors before they knew about your changed circumstances. I signed the documents that day, more out of respect than understanding. On the flight home, I stared out the window at the clouds below, wondering how I would keep such a secret. Especially from Melissa. When I returned, I told her the business trip had gone well. I ate the leftovers she served for dinner. I complained about the rising gas prices. I wore my worn-out shoes and declined her suggestion to buy a new suit. All while $7 million sat in accounts I now controlled. At first, keeping the secret felt like a betrayal. Melissa and I had always shared everything. But something held me back. Perhaps the memory of Raymond's stipulation, or perhaps some subconscious awareness that things in my marriage weren't what they seemed. I noticed things I might have overlooked before. How Melissa's girls' nights out often left her smelling of unfamiliar cologne. How she'd started password protecting her phone. How her eyes no longer lit up when I came home from work. The weeks passed, and I lived a double life. By day, I was still David Wallace, underpaid office worker living paycheck to paycheck. But during lunch breaks, I met with financial advisors. After hours, I researched investment opportunities. I set up trust accounts with names that couldn't be traced back to me. I even flew out twice more to Boston, telling Melissa they were mandatory training sessions. Instead, I was meeting with Raymond's former business partners, learning about the empire he had built and entrusted to me. What surprised me most wasn't the wealth itself, but how it hadn't changed me in the ways I expected. I didn't feel an urge to splurge or show off. Instead, I felt a growing sense of purpose, of responsibility. Raymond had seen something in me worth trusting, and I didn't want to disappoint him, even in death. 2 days before Melissa's call, I had finalized the paperwork on my first major investment, a struggling local manufacturing company that I believed had potential. I signed the documents with a strange calm, knowing I was committing more money than I would have earned in 10 years at my current job. That evening I came home with the same tired smile, kissed Melissa on the cheek, and asked what was for dinner. She suggested takeout, claiming she was too exhausted to cook. I agreed, never mentioning that I had just become a silent partner in a $1 million business venture. "You seem different lately," she said over Chinese food. "More confident." I shrugged. "Just trying to focus on the positive." She studied me with narrowed eyes. "Well, don't get too confident. We're still broke, remember?" I nodded and changed the subject, never suspecting that within 48 hours, she would be the one with a secret to reveal, one that would permanently alter both our lives. After Melissa's call, I sat in my cubicle for nearly an hour, ignoring concerned glances from coworkers. When my boss finally approached to ask if everything was all right, I simply handed him my resignation letter, one I'd drafted weeks earlier but hadn't planned to use so soon. "Family emergency," I explained. "I need to leave immediately." He seemed genuinely concerned, offering condolences and assurances that my position would be waiting when I returned. I thanked him, knowing I would never sit in that cubicle again. That evening, I returned to an empty house that no longer felt like home. Melissa had taken her clothes, her jewelry, and oddly, several of my family photos. She'd left behind the furniture, kitchen appliances, and a half-empty bottle of wine on the counter with a single glass beside it, her final toast to her escape. I didn't rage. I didn't weep. Instead, I called Gerald Hoffman. "It's time," I told him. "She's gone." Within 24 hours, a team of financial investigators was tracking every transaction Melissa had made over the past year. I provided them with account numbers, her social security number, and copies of what documentation remained. I signed power of attorney forms that allowed Gerald's team to represent me in any legal proceedings. "She believes she's ruined you," Gerald observed during one of our calls. That gives us an advantage. I nodded. Let her think that. For now. 2 days after Melissa's departure, I checked into the Metropolitan Towers, a luxury apartment building downtown that Raymond had actually owned through one of his holding companies. My new residence was a 3-bedroom penthouse on the 38th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I moved in with just 2 suitcases and my laptop. My new home remained Spartan for weeks. I had little interest in furnishings or decorations. What occupied me instead was building a new identity. David Wallace 2.0. I started by establishing a trust under a different name to handle my business affairs. Through this entity, I began acquiring small but strategic investments across the city. A struggling print shop with loyal clients. A family-owned restaurant with exceptional food but outdated marketing. A tech startup with brilliant engineers but poor management. None of the employees at these businesses knew who their new silent partner was. They just knew that someone believed in them enough to provide capital with remarkably favorable terms. Meanwhile, Gerald's investigators discovered the breadcrumbs of Melissa's betrayal. She hadn't just emptied our accounts, she'd methodically siphoned money for over 18 months, creating offshore accounts and hiding assets I never knew existed. She'd forged my signature on loan documents, leaving behind nearly $43,000 in debt that was legally in both our names. The irony wasn't lost on me. While she was secretly draining our finances, I was secretly becoming wealthy beyond anything she could imagine. The investigators also uncovered the identity of her accomplice, Robert Kincaid, my former college roommate who had remained a casual friend through the years. The same Robert who had attended our cookouts, who had helped me move furniture, who had consoled me after my father's death. The same Robert who had been sleeping with my wife for at least 2 years. They had flown to Bali, where Robert supposedly had connections to start an import business with their money. Gerald's team tracked them to a luxury resort where they were spending lavishly. $900 dinners, champagne breakfasts, chartered boats to private islands. I received weekly reports with photographs. Melissa in designer dresses I never could have afforded. Robert with his arm around her waist, both of them tanned and laughing. Their happiness built on what they thought was my misery. I pinned these photos to the otherwise bare wall of my home office. Not out of masochism, but as a reminder of Uncle Raymond's wisdom. Money reveals character. 3 months after Melissa's call, I made my boldest move yet. Through my trust, I purchased the company where I had worked for 8 years. The same company that had cut my pay twice and denied my request for promotion. I didn't fire anyone. I didn't even visit the office. Instead, I had the HR department implement long overdue raises, improve the health insurance plan, and create a daycare center for employees with children. My former coworkers celebrated their mysterious new owner as a savior. Only Jim, my cubicle neighbor who had checked on me the day Melissa called, received a personal visit. I met him for coffee, revealed my new position, and offered him a senior management role. "I don't understand," he said, stunned. "How did this happen?" "Let's just say I came into some unexpected resources," I replied. And I remembered who was kind when they had no reason to be. As my business influence grew, so did my network. People who had once barely noticed me now sought my attention. Invitations arrived for charity galas, yacht parties, exclusive clubs. I attended selectively, always observing, always remembering who had treated me with dignity before my transformation. I was building a life Melissa couldn't have imagined, not because of the wealth itself, but because of the purpose behind it. Every investment I made, every connection I formed, every decision I took was guided by Uncle Raymond's philosophy. Wealth is a responsibility, not just a privilege. And all the while, I let Melissa believe she had left me penniless and broken. The call came exactly 5 months and 12 days after Melissa had disappeared. I was in the middle of a board meeting for one of my newly acquired companies when my personal phone, the same number I'd had for years, lit up with her name. I excused myself, stepping out onto the balcony of the downtown high-rise. For a moment, I just watched the screen flash, feeling strangely calm. I had known this day would come. In fact, I had been waiting for it. Hello, Melissa, I answered, keeping my voice neutral. The line was silent for a few seconds, and then came a sound I hadn't expected, sobbing. Not the manipulative tears she had used in our arguments, but raw, desperate sobs that caught in her throat. David? Her voice cracked. I didn't think you'd answer. Why wouldn't I? I leaned against the railing, watching the city spread out beneath me, a city where I now quietly own significant properties. It's been a while. I know. She tried to compose herself. I know, and I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. In that pause, I thought about the weekly reports I'd been receiving from the private investigator I'd hired the day after she left. The detailed accounts of her lavish spending in Bali. The photographs of her and Robert on beaches, at clubs, shopping in designer stores. And then the gradual downturn that had begun about 6 weeks ago. How are you, David? She asked finally. Are you okay? I'm surviving, I replied truthfully. What about you? You sound upset. Another sob escaped her. Everything's gone wrong. Robert. She stopped herself. You know about Robert, right? Yes. He wasn't who I thought he was. Her voice hardened momentarily before breaking again. He took almost everything, David. He cleaned out our accounts while I was sleeping and disappeared. Left me with nothing but a note saying he'd found a better opportunity in Singapore. I had to suppress a bitter laugh. The investigator's most recent report had detailed exactly how Robert had emptied their joint accounts and fled with a woman he'd met at a nightclub. A woman who, ironically enough, was only interested in his apparent wealth. That must have been difficult, I said carefully. Difficult? Melissa's laugh was hollow. I'm stranded in a foreign country. My credit cards are maxed out. The hotel is threatening to call the police if I don't pay my bill. I can barely afford food. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't know who else to call. I closed my eyes, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction, yes. There was no denying the karmic justice of the situation. But also an unexpected pang of something like pity. Melissa had made her choices, but Robert's betrayal had a cruel symmetry that even I hadn't anticipated. What are you asking, Melissa? I need help. Just a loan, just enough to get home. Her voice took on the pleading tone she had always used when she wanted something. For old time's sake, David. We were together for 8 years. 8 years during which you were planning your exit. I reminded her, keeping my tone even. 8 years while you were seeing Robert behind my back. Not the whole time. She protested weakly. It just happened. Things don't just happen, Melissa. People make choices. Another silence fell. In the background, I could hear announcements in Indonesian. She was likely at the airport, hoping I'd immediately wire money for a ticket home. I have nowhere to go, she admitted finally. My parents won't speak to me after what I did to you. My friends have all taken your side. Robert took almost everything. Almost everything? She hesitated. I still have about $5,000 hidden in a separate account. Emergency money. I nodded to myself. The investigator had found that account too. It actually contained closer to $12,000, but she was keeping that information to herself, even now. So you're not completely destitute, I observed. It's not enough to start over. I need help, David. Just until I get back on my feet. Her voice softened. We could talk about everything. I've had time to think. What I did was wrong. Maybe we could. I'll be in Singapore next week, I interrupted. The lie came easily. Business trip. I could meet you there. The sudden silence told me she was calculating her options, probably wondering how I could afford international business travel when she had left me financially ruined. Singapore? She repeated. But Robert is likely long gone by now. I finished for her. But if you're concerned, we could meet somewhere else. Hong Kong, perhaps. I'll be there the following week. You're traveling for business? To Asia? Confusion colored her voice. How can you afford? Things change, Melissa. I allowed a hint of steel to enter my tone. People adapt. I'd be happy to explain when we meet. She agreed quickly after that, clearly recalibrating her approach. We arranged to meet at an upscale hotel in Singapore, where I told her I'd be staying for my meetings. I promised to book her a flight and a room. As I ended the call and turned back toward the board meeting, I felt strangely light. For months, I had been watching her from afar, tracking her movements, observing her downfall with detached interest. Now, finally, the game was changing. She thought she was coming to meet the same man she had abandoned, perhaps humbled by hardship, desperate for her return. She had no idea who would actually be waiting for her. The Marina Bay Sands Hotel towered over Singapore's skyline like a massive ship balanced atop 3 skyscrapers. I had reserved the chairman's suite, a 6,500 square foot palace of luxury with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city. For Melissa, I booked a standard room 40 floors below. I arrived 3 days early, using the time to prepare. Gerald flew in with a comprehensive file documenting Melissa's activities since her departure. We met with local attorneys to ensure everything I planned was legally sound. You don't have to do this in person, Gerald reminded me over dinner on the rooftop infinity pool deck. We could handle everything legally without confrontation. I shook my head, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. This needs to happen face to face. On the morning of our scheduled meeting, I had the hotel arrange a table at the exclusive restaurant on the observation deck. I dressed casually, designer jeans and a simple black shirt that cost more than my entire wardrobe from my previous life. No flashy watch, no obvious displays of wealth. I wanted the revelation to unfold gradually. She arrived 15 minutes late, a calculated move she had always used to gain the upper hand in meetings. I spotted her scanning the restaurant from the entrance, her expression shifting when she saw me. Even from a distance, I could read the confusion on her face. I stood as she approached, noting how she tried to maintain appearances despite her claimed financial ruin. New dress, fresh manicure, hair recently colored, all attempts to present the Melissa I remembered. David? Her voice held genuine confusion as she took in my appearance, the exclusive setting. You look different. Do I? I smiled, gesturing for her to sit. You look exactly the same. A waiter appeared immediately with champagne, Dom Perignon, her favorite. Another calculated choice on my part. I don't understand. She glanced around nervously. How can you afford this place? Last I knew you were broke? Devastated? Left with nothing? I filled her glass calmly. That was the plan, wasn't it? Her smile faltered. David, about what happened? I was going through something. A midlife crisis, maybe. I know what I did was wrong. Do you? I took a small sip of champagne. Tell me exactly what you think you did wrong. She launched into a carefully rehearsed speech about mistakes and regrets, her eyes occasionally darting to gauge my reaction. I let her talk, nodding at appropriate moments, watching as she gradually shifted from apologetic to hopeful. And I realized that what we had was real, she concluded, reaching for my hand across the table. We could start over. I've learned my lesson. I gently withdrew my hand and reached for the leather portfolio beside me. Before we discuss any future, I think we should address the past. From the portfolio, I removed a stack of documents and placed them on the table between us. On top was a photograph, Melissa and Robert on a beach in Bali, her wearing a distinctive diamond bracelet. That's a beautiful bracelet, I observed. Was it a gift from Robert? She paled slightly. How did you? Actually, it was purchased with funds from our joint savings account 2 days before you left. I tapped the photo. You transferred $12,340 to a jeweler in Bali as a prepayment. Interesting choice for someone who claimed to be emptying our accounts for a fresh start. I placed another document on the table. This is a record of all transactions from our accounts for the 18 months before you left. The highlighted ones, I gestured to the dozens of yellow lines. Show money being moved to your secret accounts, including the one in the Caymans that you didn't mention when we spoke. Her eyes widened. How could you possibly know? This, I continued, placing another document down, is a complete record of the forged signatures on loan applications and credit cards. 5 separate instances of fraud, all traceable directly to you. With each new document, her face grew paler. When I finally slid across the bank statements showing how thoroughly I'd traced her financial movements, her composure cracked completely. How? She whispered. There's no way you could afford this kind of investigation. I smiled and reached into my pocket, extracting a crisp white envelope which I placed before her. That's an interesting question, isn't it? One I think you should have asked before you left. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope, expecting legal papers. Instead, she found a single dollar bill. What is this supposed to be? That, I said quietly, is what your loyalty was worth to me. $1. I kept it as a reminder never to undervalue myself again. I stood up then, buttoning my jacket with unhurried movements. 3 weeks before you left, my great-uncle Raymond died. You never met him. He was estranged from the family. He left me over $7 million, with one condition: I couldn't tell anyone for a year. I kept his secret, even from you. I wanted to see who in my life was genuine. The color drained completely from her face as understanding dawned. $7 million? That was the initial amount. It's considerably more now. I gestured around at the luxury hotel. I own a significant stake in this place, actually. Among other investments. David, she whispered, a new calculation already forming behind her eyes. If I had known. That's precisely the point, Melissa. You didn't know. And look at the choice you made. I gathered my documents, leaving her staring at the single dollar bill. Keep it as a souvenir. It might be the most expensive lesson you've ever received. I left Melissa sitting at that table, staring at the single dollar bill as if it might transform into a lifeline if she looked at it long enough. I didn't look back as the elevator doors closed, taking me to the chairman's suite where Gerald waited with a glass of scotch. How did she take it? He asked, handing me the drink. About as expected. I loosened my tie and walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights. She'll be calling within the hour, once she regroups. Gerald nodded. And when she does? I won't answer. True to prediction, my phone rang exactly 47 minutes later. Melissa's name flashed on the screen as I watched it vibrate against the marble countertop. When it finally fell silent, a text appeared. David, please. We need to talk. I made a mistake. People deserve second chances. 6 more calls followed, each sent directly to voicemail. 23 text messages accumulated over the next 3 hours, their tone evolving from pleading to angry to desperate. I read each one without responding. At midnight, I checked out of the hotel, leaving instructions that Ms. Wallace was responsible for her own accommodations going forward. My private jet was waiting to take me back to the States, where the next phase of my life was taking shape. In the 2 years since that meeting in Singapore, I've built something far greater than mere wealth. I've created an empire founded on the principles Uncle Raymond valued: integrity, perseverance, and genuine connection. The manufacturing company I first invested in now employs over 300 people, offering the highest wages and best benefits in the industry. The tech startup has developed software that's revolutionizing medical record systems in rural hospitals. The family restaurant has expanded to 3 locations, with the original owners still maintaining creative control. I purchased a historic building downtown and converted it into affordable apartments for single parents, naming it Raymond House, in my uncle's honor. Each unit comes with access to subsidized childcare and financial literacy programs. But perhaps my most satisfying acquisition came 6 months ago, when I learned that Melissa's parents were facing foreclosure on their home of 30 years. They had co-signed on one of the loans she had taken out in my name, leaving them vulnerable when she defaulted. The bank was putting their property up for auction. I attended that auction personally, outbidding the developers who wanted to tear down the modest ranch house and build luxury condos. After signing the paperwork, I approached her father, a proud man who had never approved of me, believing his daughter had married down. "Mr. Calloway," I said, extending my hand, "I believe this belongs to you." I handed him the deed, transferred back into his name, along with documents showing the loan had been paid in full. "I don't understand," he stammered, his wife clutching his arm in disbelief. "Why would you do this after what Melissa did to you?" "Because who we choose to be after betrayal defines us more than the betrayal itself," I replied, thinking of Uncle Raymond. "And I choose not to let her actions determine mine." Their tearful gratitude was unnecessary but appreciated, as was the information they reluctantly shared, that Melissa had returned to the States 6 months after our Singapore meeting, using a fake name to avoid the creditors pursuing her. She was working minimum wage jobs, moving frequently, living in the shadows of her former life. I never sought her out again. There was no need. Our story had reached its natural conclusion that day in Singapore. Instead, I focused on honoring Uncle Raymond's legacy. I established scholarships in his name at 3 universities, funding students from challenging backgrounds who demonstrated the resilience he valued. I created a foundation supporting ethical business practices and community investment. Last month, I finally moved out of the luxury apartment into a home of my own, a renovated lighthouse on the coast that Raymond had purchased decades ago but never lived in. It's not ostentatious, but it's solid and enduring, with panoramic views of the ocean and plenty of room for the books and art I've come to appreciate. Sometimes in the evenings, I sit on the deck watching the waves and reflect on how differently everything could have turned out. If Melissa had stayed. If I had never received that inheritance. If I had responded to betrayal with bitterness instead of building something better. In my wallet, I still carry that $1 bill from the envelope, not as a reminder of Melissa, but as a reminder of the choice Uncle Raymond gave me. The choice to see people clearly, to value loyalty, to build something meaningful. As for Melissa, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she occasionally mentions me, claiming I never got over her leaving. She tells people I'm still heartbroken somewhere, clutching memories of our marriage, unable to move forward. I smile whenever these stories get back to me. Let her believe what she needs to. She thought she left me in ruins, but she never understood the fundamental truth Uncle Raymond taught me. Sometimes, losing what you thought you needed is the only way to find what you truly deserve. And in that sense, perhaps I should thank her. By trying to destroy my life, she accidentally set me free.